You've pulled into a rest stop at 2 a.m. and seen it before you even parked. Rows of semis sitting in the dark, exhaust rising slow and steady, cab lights burning amber through fogged glass. And before you finish the thought, you already judged it. What a waste. Why are these drivers burning fuel all night while they sleep? Doesn't that drain the tank by morning? Isn't anyone paying attention to what this costs? Here's what might catch you off guard. A fully loaded semi running all night at idle burns less fuel than your drive to work tomorrow morning. So what's the engine actually doing when the truck isn't moving? Why do drivers keep it running when cab heaters and generators exist? What happens the moment it shuts off? And why does California fine a fleet $25,000 for doing exactly what looks like nothing at all? None of those questions have obvious answers, and the real answer to all of them starts with something you've probably never thought about: what an engine is actually doing when it looks like it's doing nothing. Here's the first thing most people have completely backwards. Idling looks like rest. It isn't. The moment that engine drops to a low hum and the truck stops moving, it shifts from one job to another, and the second job is harder to see, but just as critical. Oil pressure has to stay up. Coolant temperature has to hold. The batteries powering the cab need a constant charge. The air brake system, the thing that actually stops 80,000 pounds of steel, runs on pressurized air that the engine generates. Let that pressure drop, and the brakes lock. Not release. Lock. Think about it like a hospital on a quiet night. From the outside, nothing seems to be happening, but cut the power and every monitor, every pump, every ventilator fails at once. The engine sitting still in that truck stop isn't resting. It's holding the whole system at ready. So the engine stays on. Fine. But surely a machine that hauls 40 tons down the highway is hemorrhaging fuel the moment it parks, right? That assumption is wrong. And it's wrong in a way that should genuinely embarrass both of us. A heavy diesel at idle turns at somewhere between 600 and 700 revolutions per minute. Merge onto any highway in your car, and your engine is spinning at roughly 4 times that. At that near stillness, a Class 8 semi burns around 0.8 gallons per hour, give or take depending on age and conditions, but close enough to work with. Run that across an 8-hour rest stop, and you've used maybe 6 or 7 gallons total. The largest engine in that parking lot is running at a fraction of the energy cost of the smallest vehicle in it. That's not a typo, that's physics. But fuel cost is only half the calculation, and it's actually the less important half. Here's the part the industry has known for decades that almost nobody outside it understands. Diesel engines don't wear out on the highway. They wear out at startups. When a diesel sits cold for several hours, oil retreats. It drains away from the valves, the camshaft, the rocker arms, everything sitting at the top of the engine, and settles at the bottom of the oil pan. The moment you turn the key, those upper components run dry. Metal against metal, no lubrication, for the few seconds it takes the oil pump to push fluid back up to where it's needed. Some widely cited industry estimates put as much as 90% of total diesel engine wear in those first seconds of a cold start. Engineers argue about the exact number. Nobody argues about the direction. Every hour of idle is one fewer cold start. One fewer round of dry metal grinding. Across hundreds of thousands of miles, that arithmetic quietly decides whether an engine reaches 1,000,000 miles or dies at 600,000. And this problem is older than most people realize. Why has this always run? Through the 1950s and into the 1960s, there were no auxiliary generators, no insulated sleeper berths, no independent cab heaters a driver could run without the engine. Overnight drivers slept in bare, uninsulated cabs, sometimes in heavy coats, sometimes in sleeping bags, with the engine running because there was nothing else. By the 1970s, with fuel lines stretching around city blocks and government rationing in effect, truck stops held rows of 40 or 50 trucks running their main engines straight through every night without pause. Federal estimates put nationwide long-haul idling at nearly 1 billion gallons of fuel per year. That number is what finally made idle reduction a policy priority. But the infrastructure to replace idling with something better barely existed until the early 2000s. For 5 decades, the running engine wasn't an oversight. It was the only option on the table. And once you see what idling actually solves, you start noticing it in places you never looked before. You have been surrounded by it your entire life. That ambulance idling outside the ER with the engine quietly running. It's keeping the defibrillator charged, the oxygen system pressurized, the interior temperature locked so the crew can move the moment a call comes in. That school bus running 10 minutes before any child boards. The driver isn't early. They're building air brake pressure so the brakes release safely when it's time to move. That fire truck parked at the staging area with the engine on. Hydraulic systems, pump pressure, and emergency equipment all need to be at operating state before the truck reaches the scene, not after. Every one of those is a life safety calculation you never had to make because someone already made it for you. Now go one layer deeper. That refrigerated trailer humming outside the grocery warehouse at 6 a.m. is holding 34 degrees for the produce inside. And if that engine stops, the temperature starts climbing within minutes and the entire load becomes a loss. That delivery truck double parked with the engine running while the driver carries boxes to your door is protecting a refrigerated cargo bay that loses its temperature window in under 4 minutes without power. That farm tractor sitting motionless at the field edge while the farmer walks away is still running because the irrigation pump or hay baler attached to it needs steady engine speed to keep working, and the tractor provides that even when nothing is moving. You benefit from all of it. You've never paid attention to any of it. And then there's the layer that nobody ever thinks about. That garbage truck idling between houses, the hydraulic compactor that crushes your trash, needs constant pressure to reset between every single pickup. Without the engine, the truck fills up in 3 stops and the whole route fails. That construction site truck that never seems to shut off is powering the entire job site's tools through a power takeoff shaft connected directly to the drivetrain. That airport ground crew vehicle idling near the gate has a hydraulic cargo lift that needs pressure built before the next aircraft arrives, because on a tarmac, waiting for pressure to build is time the airline doesn't have. Every one of those engines you ever walked past without a second thought was doing invisible, load-bearing work inside a system you depend on. The cost is real and the industry isn't pretending otherwise. Heavy idling can add somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 in fuel costs per truck per year, on top of accelerated oil consumption and more frequent filter replacements. More than 30 states now have idle reduction laws on the books, and California's fines can reach $25,000 per violation. But the infrastructure replacing idling is moving fast. Electrified parking at more than 10,000 truck stops across North America lets drivers plug the cab directly into shore power. The same concept as charging a phone, but for £80,000 a vehicle. Federal tax credits have made auxiliary power units, small separate generators that run the cab without touching the main engine, more economically accessible for fleet operators. New electric platforms from major manufacturers carry enough battery capacity to run a full cab through the night on zero idle at all. And real-time thermal monitoring software now decides automatically when an engine can safely shut down, versus when conditions require it to keep running, taking the guesswork away from a driver who just wants 8 hours of sleep. The truck stop at 2 a.m. was never a parking lot full of careless decisions. Every hum you mistook for waste was a system running at its lowest, most deliberate state, holding cargo temperature, keeping brake pressure live, protecting engines against the wear that happens in the first seconds after a cold key turn. You thought you were watching fuel burn for nothing. What you were actually watching was the supply chain hold its breath between deliveries. And now that you know what that sound means, you'll hear it completely differently every time. If there's something you walk past every day and wonder about, drop it in the comments. We read every single one, and the best suggestions make it into future videos. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.